Don't come home early tonight. I just need a little space. The message blinked on Alex's phone. No emojis, just that flat, sterile sentence, like a scalpel making its first incision. Alex stared at it, thumb hovering. He could already hear the silence in the apartment, the too perfect arrangement of throw pillows on the couch, the faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the hallway like guilt with the designer label. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he put on his coat, grabbed his phone, and walked out into the biting chill of a St. Petersburg evening. The city streets bled sodium orange beneath his shoes, glistening with melted snow and old secrets. As he walked, his mind wasn't racing. It was slowing, sharpening, cataloging details. Years of investigative work had trained him for this, for betrayal, for the moment when someone you thought you knew becomes a stranger wearing their skin. Her message hadn't surprised him. It had confirmed a suspicion he'd been too careful to voice. As he reached the entrance to the old house they'd called home for the past 3 years, he hesitated only for a second. Then, slowly, soundlessly, he climbed the steps. Each creak in the wooden staircase felt like an echo from a life that was already over. He paused at their front door, listened. Voice laughed, not hers, not the high, practiced trill she used in social settings. It was softer, more intimate. She was trying to sound natural. She failed. Alex slipped his hand into his coat pocket, pulling out his phone. Camera on, sound recording enabled. The lock turned without a click. He'd oiled it weeks ago when she was out shopping for a new mood for their bedroom. He pushed the door open just enough to see without being seen. There she was. Oh yeah, legs draped across a man's lap like a prize. Her golden hair swept over one bare shoulder, lips stained wine red. And him? Nikita, no doubt. That smug slouch, the second-hand leather jacket he thought made him look rebellious, not just pathetic. Alex didn't move. He simply filmed. Every second, every smirk, every whisper. The camera didn't shake. He felt no rage, no sorrow, only clarity. His breath was steady, his hands calm. In that moment, he realized something. This wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning. The video was saved, backed up in 3 places before he even left the stairwell. Alexei didn't slam the door, didn't burst in. He didn't scream. What would be the point? Anger is easy. It burns bright, fast, and then it's gone, leaving nothing behind but ashes and an even weaker man. But cold? Cold lingers. It creeps in slow and stays beneath the skin. He stepped back down into the courtyard, disappearing into the misty twilight of St. Petersburg like a shadow that had never been there to begin with. The bar he chose wasn't one they'd ever visited together, not that she would have noticed. It was small, quiet, the kind of place where people came to forget things, not to be seen. A jazz track played low in the background. No one looked up when he walked in. Perfect. Alexei sat in a back corner, ordered a black coffee he wouldn't drink, and opened his laptop. Old habits die hard, and some return sharper than ever when the ground beneath you breaks. He pulled up her social media profiles first. Olia in all her curated perfection, glittering smiles, weekend getaways, coffee cups in golden light, Sunday bliss with my love captions written beneath photos of him, while she was already in someone else's bed. It was like watching an actress perform a role she'd long stopped caring about. The image of a woman who needed the world to believe she was adored. And then he looked closer. There, in the background of a photo tagged "Only Client Lunch," was the same leather jacket. Nikita. Not even trying to hide. A blurred reflection in a restaurant mirror. A stray hand on her waist. Careless mistakes. She thought he would never notice. Most people wouldn't. He wasn't most people. Alexei zoomed in, screen grabbed it, time-stamped it, cross-referenced with her messages from that day. She'd said she was visiting her mother. The lie felt so ordinary now, but it was still worth documenting. One truth stacked on top of another lie, like bricks. And he was building something. Next, he accessed her email. She never changed her passwords, not because she trusted him, but because she forgot how sharp his memory was. Within minutes, he downloaded threads of messages. Hotel reservations, deleted invoices, a strange money transfer labeled consulting fee. Consulting for what? Her job had nothing to do with finance. He flagged it for later. A waitress asked if he needed anything else. He shook his head. She moved on. He wasn't here for comfort. He was here to watch the story unfold from the inside out. Back at the apartment, his apartment, her heels were still by the door, her favorite coat still hanging. It meant she'd be back, which suited him perfectly. In the bedroom, he opened the drawer where she kept her old paperbacks. Tucked inside the pages of the bell jar, ironic, really, was a note, folded, worn. Handwritten. You weren't supposed to find this. He didn't recognize the handwriting. He didn't need to. The voice inside him that used to second guess had gone silent now. In its place was something else, steady, clean, like ice over a lake. Alexei sat on the edge of the bed and turned the recorder on again. Not video this time, just voice. Entry 1, he said quietly. I'm not angry. I'm awake. Then he smiled. Not cruelly. Just as a man who'd finally stopped pretending. Tomorrow, he'd call his lawyer. Tonight, he would sleep. Not because he felt peace, but because he was going to need his strength. The game had just begun. By morning, the air in the apartment was sharp with winter and silence. Alexei stood in the kitchen, pouring boiling water into a glass teapot. The routine calmed his hands. Not that they were shaking. She came home just before 7, still smelling faintly of wine and someone else's cologne. Her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks at the end of a lie. He didn't greet her, didn't turn. He poured the tea, stirred in lemon, and placed a cup at her usual spot on the kitchen table. Long night? He asked. She hesitated. Her coat was still on. I stayed at Katya's. He nodded like he believed her, like he cared. Olia studied his face for signs of suspicion, fear, confrontation, but found none. That was the first crack in her composure. She expected coldness or anger, not indifference. Indifference was dangerous. I'm taking some days off, he said, sipping his tea. Work's been slow. Figured we could talk. Talk? Her voice faltered slightly. About what? Alexei smiled. About us? She looked at him then, truly looked. And for the first time in weeks, couldn't read him. He didn't bring it up that day, or the next. Instead, he made her breakfast, let her have the shower first, asked about her job like he used to when he still thought her answers mattered. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the foundation beneath her life was already cracking. The email to their landlord was sent. The apartment? Registered under his name only? The lease would be changed. The divorce documents? Drafted and waiting, just one signature away. The video from that night? Stored. Clipped. Watermarked under a pseudonym, not yet published, but prepared, ready to burn her perfect image with surgical precision if needed. Alexei didn't want revenge for the sake of it. He wanted distance, clarity, but he also wanted control because she had taken that from him without asking, without flinching. So he took it back and then gave her the illusion of winning. That weekend, he posted the first video. It wasn't explicit. Not really. Just a short black and white clip of a man's silhouette holding a phone at a slightly open doorway. Faint voices, a woman's laugh. Recognizable only to those who knew it intimately. The caption read, "Forgiveness is easy when you stop feeling anything at all." No tags, no names. But people started to talk. Quietly, subtly. A few mutual friends reached out in private messages. Some sent nothing, just watched, viewed, rewatched. Alexei didn't respond. Olia noticed the shift first on social media. A decline in likes, a change in tone beneath the comments, a few unfollows. Then more. When she asked him if something was wrong, he only said, "You tell me." He waited until she brought it up. "You've been distant," she said one evening, curling up next to him on the couch in her silk robe, the same one she used to wear for him alone. "Is something going on?" He looked at her like he was tired. Not of the conversation, but of pretending. "I think we want different things." Her smile wavered. "I still want you." "No, you want not to be alone." She stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know, Olia." The silence that followed was deeper than any shouting match could have been. She looked at him then with real fear. Not because he was angry, but because he wasn't, because she couldn't manipulate stillness. "I made a mistake," she whispered, "but it didn't mean anything. It's not like I loved him," he cut in. "I know. That's not the part that mattered." Then what did? That you could lie so easily for so long and still ask me to hand you my trust in the morning like nothing happened. She reached for him. "I don't want to lose you." "You already did." He stood, walked to his desk drawer, and returned with a neat cream-colored folder. Her name on the front. Divorce documents inside. A relocation notice, a list of her belongings already boxed. Her face paled. "Alexei, wait, we can't. You'll have 30 days. She tried to speak, but no words came out, only breath, raw, shallow. And then he leaned in gently and kissed her forehead, like a man saying goodbye to someone who died long ago. That night she left the bedroom door open. He closed it quietly from the inside. He opened his phone, stared at the note he'd found in her book again. "You weren't supposed to find this." He wondered if she ever meant it, if it was for someone else, a former lover, a secret she never confessed. It didn't matter now. What mattered was that the lie had been told in his house, with his time, in his trust. And he was reclaiming all of it, not with rage, not with fire, but with precision. Oya didn't move out immediately. She paced the apartment like a ghost, trying to haunt her own life. Her makeup sat untouched on the vanity, her perfume began to fade into nothing, and her carefully arranged world, the one she had staged and curated like a gallery exhibit, had started to rot at the corners. Alexei said little now. He didn't yell, didn't scold, he simply existed with a calm so suffocating that it hollowed the air around them. She tried to provoke a reaction, tears, anger, a plea for reconciliation, but he never flinched. He was already elsewhere, his soul packed away days ago, waiting in a suitcase by the door she couldn't bring herself to open. Then came the second video. This one didn't show faces, just voices, a slowed-down version of Nikita laughing, Olia's whisper, breathy, intimate, unmistakable. You're not him, and that's exactly why I want you.
The clip cut to silence, posted on a private account, again without names, but the damage was precise. Her coworkers saw it. Her friend Katya stopped replying to her messages. Her manager quietly mentioned that clients had requested different staff for campaign work.
The ripple effect had begun, but it was Nikita's betrayal that broke her. He hadn't returned her messages in days, not since Alexei had sent the anonymized clips to Nikita's company's general input. The subject line had been simple. You should know who you're trusting with your brand. No accusations, just implications. Olia found out the fallout through silence. Nikita blocked her, removed their photos from his page. His number stopped working. The dream she'd envisioned, carefree, rebellious, thrilling, vanished like cheap perfume in cold air. The final crack came when she went to his flat, buzzed, waited, then buzzed again. Nothing. A neighbor from the third floor leaned over the railing. You're too late, sweetheart, the woman said, chewing a cigarette filter. He moved out yesterday, left in a hurry. Olia didn't respond. She simply stood in the hallway, wrapped in a faux fur coat that suddenly felt like armor, with no war to fight. Her reflection in the window looked 10 years older. Not a seductress, not a queen of reinvention. Just a woman who bet everything on a lie and lost both men in the process. When she returned to the apartment, Alexei was waiting, seated at the dining table with a calm that had turned glacial. Rough day? He asked. She dropped her bag without answering. I have something for you, he added. He slid a manila envelope across the table, a single photograph inside. Nikita and another woman, younger, laughing together at a rooftop bar. Timestamp, 2 weeks before Olia's affair had even begun. She stared at it. Then, at Alexei. You know, I suspected, he said, then I confirmed it. So why didn't you tell me? Her voice broke at the edges. Why didn't you stop me? Because you needed to step over the edge yourself. Otherwise, you'd always say, I pushed you. She sank into the chair opposite him, a broken silhouette in designer clothing. He watched her in silence, not with satisfaction, but with the grim recognition of someone who had finally stopped romanticizing mercy. That night, she cried for real. Not performative, not controlled. Just sobs into a pillow that no longer smelled like home. The bedroom felt too quiet without his voice, without the subtle hum of his presence beside her. She clung to the space between them like it was still salvageable. But Alexei didn't return to bed. He stayed in the living room, quietly reading, as if her grief were background noise. The static of a station he'd already tuned out from. The next morning, she tried one last plea. Alexei, she said, standing at the door, barely holding herself together. Please, I made a mistake, yes, but I'm still me. I'm still the woman you built a life with. He closed the book gently and looked at her. No, Olia, you're the woman I didn't know I was living with. Tears welled in her eyes. So, that's it? No, he said, standing and walking toward her. This is the middle. The ending was when you made that choice and expected me to live with it. He handed her a key, not to the apartment, but to the small storage unit where he had moved her boxed things. Labeled, ordered, impersonal. You'll find everything there. Clothes, papers, keepsakes. She hesitated. You kept the keepsakes. I don't need them, he replied. But I knew you'd try to pretend none of this happened, and one day, you'll want proof that it did. Outside, snow had begun to fall in sharp, delicate flakes. Olia stepped into the cold with the key clenched in her fist and her world unraveling behind her. Alexei stood by the window, watching, not with cruelty. His closure. 3 weeks later, the apartment was quiet, empty in a way that didn't ache anymore. The living room, once a curated mix of her taste and his practicality, now held only essentials. Neutral, clean, no trace of Olia, not in the decor, not in the scent. Even the faint echo of her voice had been scrubbed out by silence. Alexei sat on the edge of the sofa, elbows on knees, a small black camera balanced on the tripod across from him. He pressed record. The red light blinked.
For a moment, he said nothing, just breathed. Then he looked directly into the lens, not with performance, but presence. Goya, if you're watching this, I assume it means you're still looking for an explanation, or maybe just hoping I left a door open somewhere. I didn't. He let that hang in the air before continuing. There's no speech here, no revenge, just clarity. You didn't break me, but you did show me who I had become and what I had ignored. You see, I used to believe that love made us strong, that loyalty would protect us, but it turns out love doesn't stop betrayal, and loyalty doesn't shield you from cowardice. You wanted freedom, I gave it to you. But what you mistook for my silence was never weakness. It was choice. You lit the fire. I just let it burn. He leaned back slightly, voice steady. I hope you find what you were chasing. I really do. Just know this. You won't find it in someone else's bed or in likes or in pretending you didn't lose something. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. There was no anger in his face, no grief left to mine. Thank you for one thing, though, for the lesson. From now on, I won't ask anyone to choose me. They'll either show up or they won't. He reached forward and switched off the camera. The room was still again. Alexei uploaded the video, but not publicly. He sent it to a private drive, shared with one email. Olia's. No password, no expiration, just the truth available whenever she was ready to confront it, if ever. He deleted the raw footage from his camera, shut the laptop, then stood and looked around the apartment one last time. His bag was already by the door, inside it a few clothes, a pair of notebooks, and his camera gear. Everything else could be replaced. He locked the door behind him, handed the keys to the agent downstairs, and walked out into the pale morning. St. Petersburg in early spring had a strange light, soft but cold, like a quiet reckoning. His train wasn't due for another hour, but he didn't mind waiting. A new city was waiting. He didn't need to start over. He just needed to start clean. Back inside the apartment, the last thing remaining on the windowsill was a single object. The note, still folded, still bearing those words in unfamiliar handwriting. You weren't supposed to find this, but he had. And now finally he could leave it behind, not as a wound, but as proof that nothing and no one could make him doubt himself again.